morning, McMaster University. It is 8:32 a.m., November 29th, and I'm your host, Ali Siddiqui. As coronavirus cases rise across the country, it cannot be more important for a vaccine to come out. However, actually getting the vaccine out to the Canadian public will pose yet another challenge. Considering half of all remote healthcare centers have no access to power grids, one hurdle especially could be the transport and storage of vaccines in below freezing temperatures. In light of these hurdles, researchers such as Dr. Miller and his team at McMaster University have developed a novel sugar film technology to preserve and transport vaccines without refrigeration. To make coffee, all you need is some water, a teaspoon of sugar, and some good old Folgers. However, in order to potentially save the world, all you need is some water and a bit of dried vaccine. Up first, we spoke to a McMaster researcher who's working with Dr. Miller, Dr. Kristie Chow. Dr. Chow, can you describe how vaccine sugar films work?
Hi, Ali. Thank you for having me here today. So the vaccine sugar film is based on air drying the viruses and the vaccine on a film that is made using a mixture of balloon and trehalose. And we call this the PT film. This PT film can thermally stabilize two envelope viruses and their corresponding vaccine. The two viruses are herpes simplex virus type 2, HSV2, a DNA virus, and influenza A virus, IAV, and RNA virus.
And so, how long can these vaccines now last?
Up to 12 weeks at 40 degrees Celsius. Not only that, the immunogenicity of HSV2 vaccine and IAV vaccine dried in PT films were retained at 40 degrees Celsius for at least 2 months and 3 months respectively.
Next, joining us on the program is Dr. Victoria Tyndall, a McMaster researcher studying vaccines. Dr. Tyndall, so far the discovery seems too good to be true. Are there any limitations to sugar films?
Absolutely right. There are some limitations to the experiment. So first, when researchers subjected the vaccines to an increased temperature and left them in this increased temperature for weeks, the vaccines preserved in the sugar film were functional when administered to mice, but about 2 times as much of the vaccine was needed to account for the volume lost during the mimicked transportation time. So this was due to evaporation, and the highest amount of evaporation was recorded in the first 4 weeks for one of the vaccines, with a consistent slow decrease in volume after that, meaning that the first 4 weeks of the trip for the vaccine would be very costly.
Has the treatment reached clinical testing on humans yet?
Unfortunately, it hasn't. The results on the mice look very promising, but this experiment needs a lot of further testing before it's ready to hit the market to allow for easier widespread vaccination.
Our next guest is a PhD candidate and a COVID-19 expert, Michael D'Agostino. So, what problem is this discovery addressing?
This discovery is addressing the lack of a cold chain in developing countries. Sometimes these they don't quite have the infrastructure that first world countries like the United States or some countries in Europe have, where they are able to keep materials refrigerated or even frozen for extended periods of time. By eliminating the need for cold chain by either spray drying or, in this case, drying out the vaccines in a sugar film, they're enabling these vaccine companies to have a greater outreach and able to get these vaccines distributed to parts of the world that maybe ordinarily wouldn't be able to maintain something that needed to be stored at minus 80 degrees.
What do you think is the biggest hurdle standing in the way of commercializing this invention?
While sugar films are much cheaper than other spray drying or lyophilization methods that require specialized equipment, you still do see a drop in the titer of these vaccines over time. And another concern that I would have would be potential changes in the antigenicity of the virus particles or attenuated viruses in these sugar films.
To discuss the implications of this invention on a global scale, we bring in Abbira Nadarajah, a global health policy analyst from McMaster. Abbira, how important is a spray-dried vaccine for the rest of the world?
Thank you so much for having me. For sure that the past decade has had a lot of progress in terms of vaccination, both in terms of increasing accessibility to vaccination programs as well as new vaccines. It has become a driving force in decreasing child mortality, not to mention the number of deaths caused by vaccine-preventable diseases like measles have decreased significantly from approximately 0.9 million in 2000 to 0.4 million in 2010. But at the end of the day, the discovery of these vaccinations still have an extensive amount of cost associated with them in terms of research, development, transport, and domestic budgets are not able to support that on their own. When we look at the sugar film that we've been talking about today, there's an extensive amount of potential to decrease production and transport costs, and that will have benefits in terms of administration, making sure that remote communities have access to these vaccines, and overall different avenues of healthcare delivery will be strengthened by this innovation as well.
Last guest on the show is a Pfizer representative from Winnipeg, Andrew Yu. Andrew, can you tell us about the new vaccine and how Dr. Miller's sugar film research can help your company?
Hello, Ali. Thank you so much for having me here today. We expect to produce globally up to 50 million doses in 2020 and up to 1.3 billion doses by the end of 2021. But the problem is that the product needs to be constantly stored at -80 degrees to maintain its efficacy. As you can imagine, this can create a critical issue if we want to transport the Pfizer vaccine to underdeveloped countries or even some areas in North America. And this novel thermostabilizing platform developed by Dr. Miller and his research team provides us with a feasible and reliable way to overcome the temperature limitation without hampered drug efficacy.
In the case of sugar films, it appears the invention is capable of preserving vaccine cold chain, circumventing cooling costs and transportation time, and can potentially save millions of lives. Doing so is a promising approach for those living in developing or remote regions of the world where refrigeration is just not possible. With the new vaccine on the horizon, a development like this could be a game changer. That is the BDC News. Siddiqui. Thank you so much to my guests and experts, and thank you for watching.